And it is important that the crown, the maple crown, both as it connects with the head of state, as the head of state's representative, be above the political fray. Despite Jeffrey Simpson's constant advice on this issue, here's the hard truth. It matters not if a Canadian head of state is voted in by houses of parliament, senators, members of the Order of Canada, or the highest mark holders in penmanship and posture, as some have suggested. The minute there is any kind of election, we have contaminated the Crown's unifying and stabilizing role. In our courts, it is not the people versus this or that individual or corporate defendant. It is the Crown, as the reflection of the best judgment of law officers and peace officers who serve the Crown and what it represents, and not themselves and their own political careers, as occurs elsewhere. When the Loyalists were expelled from the then exclusionary and narrow American Patriot insurgency, 1776, an insurgency that denied actually wanting independence as part of their cause célèbre until weeks before they changed their mind, the Loyalists were not anti-democratic. They were, many of them, already elected in local and state assemblies and councils in the American states. But they were against the exclusion of history, constitutional tradition, and the pluralism under the Crown such as it existed then. American democracy was born in anger and armed insurrection against the Crown. Canadian democracy evolved over time with the Crown at its core. Neither system is perfect, but they are profoundly different, and we must never lose sight of that. And for Quebec, the Crown has been a protector under French and English monarchs ever since the Quebec Act of 1774. We see where Francophone populations in Louisiana and New England disappeared to the status of linguistic and cultural mini-relics. In Quebec, more people than ever speak French. French civil code and civilization, a distinct French-Canadian Quebecois civilization, is thriving.
Canadian Crown that is continually depreciated, either by design or through ignorance, will eventually atrophy. It will wither and die, and with it, an integral part of our Constitution. Pendant plus de 40 ans,
for over 40 years, all prime ministers, including the current one, have acted to diminish the Crown's legitimacy and authority in the eyes of both the public and the political class. This trend has been constant and always directed at progressively reducing the role of the Crown.
Ironically, even the general objective to Canadianize the Crown, laudable in itself, seems to have had the unintended consequence of weakening the Crown. Appointing distinguished Canadians as Governor General, enhancing their role as functional head of state on behalf of the Queen, seemed perversely to have diminished the symbolic and substantive value of the Crown. It is way past time to ask how and where this diminution of the Crown is leading. We know all too well, but can anything be done to restore a rightful appreciation for the value of the Crown? Governor-Generals are thus left to twist in the wind, able neither to enter into public conflict with the Prime Minister and thus redirect public pressure where it should go, nor to answer questions about activities recommended and approved by the Prime Minister. They are condemned to stay mute and helpless in the face of hostile public opinion, incapable of shifting responsibility for decisions back to where it belongs, on the back of the Prime Minister, who can thus manipulate them for political ends. The principal advisor to the Governor-General becomes his puppet master, drawing him closer to the field of partisan politics. Moreover, our Prime Minister has disregarded the sovereign's representative and his constitutional role, which according to the recognized convention is, quote, to be consulted, to encourage and to warn. In fact, When a prime minister does not seem to appreciate the person who occupies the position, he can keep to the strict 5-year limit. By having its term whittled down to 5 years, the prestige of the Governor General office has been placed at the mercy of successive changes of government. The perception created by all this is that the Prime Minister has the right to decide the length of a Governor General's terms as he sees fit and for reasons he need not specify, with the resulting diminished credibility for the holder of the office. By cutting back the length of the Governor General terms, we have opened the door to still further prime ministerial domination over the appointment's duration and stability, bringing it ever more closely into the partisan political orbit, particularly when the appointees are former politicians. As Professor Peter Russell wrote last year, and I quote, "Admittedly, much of the advantage of the monarchical system is lost in Canada when prime ministers recommend partisan colleagues to be appointed Governor General and represent the Queen here." Finally, the independence required by the function of Governor General is also framed by its underlying financial conditions. Les Canadiens dans leur ensemble.
After a recent Nanos poll, Canadians replied about the main problem of their democratic system, that the office of the Prime Minister holds too much power. That was the opinion of 41.6% of them, while only 13.3% said that it was the House of Commons. Executive dominance is definitely the Achilles heel of Canadian democracy, and it is this tendency to concentrate too much power in the hands of one person we should be recalibrated.
That are also distorting Canadians' perception of what the Queen's representative is and does. Some of these results from decisions made at Rideau Hall. According to their official commission, justices of the Supreme Court have at times substituted for the Governor General for royal assent that enacts bill passed by Parliament. By being replaced too often in the exercise of this important constitutional function, the Governor General leaves the impression that it is not sufficiently important. At the same time, it blurs the line of demarcation between the judicial and legislative branches of our system of government. Recognizing all these facts is instructive. It leads us to ask what rational approach we should take to a constitutional monarchy. The Crown occupies a central place in our Parliament and our democracy. The Crown embodies the continuity of the state and is the underlying principle of its institutional unity. The Crown is fused to all three branches of government. If we refuse to maintain the principles that define our system of government and continue by small repeated negligence or through the force of precedence to undermine the very institution that is the cornerstone of our Constitution, we are all allowing the most powerful players in the system, the executive power represented by the Prime Minister, to tighten a personal and partisan stranglehold around the office and function of Governor General. It is wrong to think that what the sovereign loses in power and prestige directly benefits and strengthens the country's democratic character. The Crown represents everything that is stable in our society, and as the representative of the Crown in Canada, the Governor General has an obligation to make sure that the respected institutions continue to be meaningful. How can we protect the principle of responsible government under the Crown, which is at the heart of our democratic system? As Eugene Forcey wrote, and I quote, "Only the Queen can stop irresponsible government," end of quote.
We are all familiar with the majesty and transcendence that this seemingly exotic institution brings to our national life. Some people say that it's out of date. I often wonder, what does the time of day have to do with it? I wonder why it is so difficult for people to see that the monarchy only adds value to our national life. It adds to our national color, our pageantry, the diversity of our cultures, and the internationalism of our identity. It adds and does not take anything away. So why should we tamper with it? How dull would our national liturgy be if the focus of attention on national occasions were no longer in any respect to be an intimate part of a 1,000-year-old monarchy and a supranational throne? For too long, the Crown has been one of the least recognized and most neglected components of Canada's governance. This is the result not only of its being taken for granted, but because of official and constructive neglect. We know from experience and observation that omission, one-upmanship, and sometimes the desire to snub have each been a potent tool in the hands of those who diminish the role of the Crown in government, in the academy, in the media, and in our schools. The result is that few Canadians today understand the Crown or realize the role that the Canadian monarchy plays, not only as the centerpiece of our government, but as the cornerstone of our democracy. As Minister of Citizenship, Immigration and Multiculturalism, I am very fortunate to attend many citizenship ceremonies. It's certainly the highlight of my responsibility. When I speak at these events and I look out over the audiences of beaming and proud, happy and hopeful new Canadians, I always try to point out and emphasize the essential role of the monarchy in Canada, which of course they embrace in the most intimate way through the oath of loyalty. I explain that it empowers the institutions that protect our rights and freedoms, our parliamentary democracy and the rule of law. And I stress that this is why everyone in Canada is equal under the law and no one is above the law, and that this is the result of hundreds of years of refinement and practice. I want all of our citizens, both new and long-standing, to know that it is the Queen who proclaimed the new Canadian flag and signed the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I want them to realize that we choose our governments by means of elections that perpetuate the Westminster system of government, the oldest continuing democratic system in the world. And I want them to understand that affirming our allegiance to the Queen is not just going through the motions, but it is a promise to be responsible for ourselves and our families and to respect the dignity of all citizens, in return for which we enjoy all of the rights and freedoms that are guaranteed by the Crown, whose living embodiment is the Queen, her heirs and successors. In other words, that it affirms our allegiance to Canada itself, which in turn allows us to enjoy the blessings of freedom, democracy, our very human rights, and the rule of law. I wonder if you would consider spending some time discussing how best to explain the relevance of the monarchy to so many Canadians who have been frankly kept in the dark about it by their teachers or their parents, by government officials, and so forth. Is the strongest argument for the monarchy that it stems from our history? That might be persuasive for an audience of historians and history buffs. Is the best approach to argue from entrenchment? My suggestion would be that people need to know more about the link between the monarchy and the long-term stability and peacefulness of our society, the strength that we derive from the continuity of all of our institutions, the peaceful accommodation that comes from the right to support or oppose the monarchical system, the benign Crown that punishes no one for questioning its validity, only for trying to overthrow the state. I wish you all the best in your discussions and success, not in preaching to the choir, but in communicating the importance of the monarchy to all Canadians, so that by doing little that is of practical benefit, we do not permit ignorance, complacency, envy of distinction or excellence, or even a kind of anti-British xenophobia to triumph. God save the Queen. Long may she reign over us.